It was July of 1863, and, well, Gettysburg was over, and we heard about that, and some fellow from the South came up here and came up through Indiana and had a raid up here, John Hunt Morgan, and we had to follow along and see where he was going to go. So we all got together and we followed along, and he was always there before we got there. And they could move 45 miles a day because they were on horseback, and well, if we were infantry, we couldn't move that fast. But anyway, we tried to get him, and they did capture John Hunt Morgan. He had a raid through here and up in Ohio, and they put him in prison in Ohio. Problem is, he escaped. That's not very good. Well, later on in the war, toward the end of the war, we were down around Richmond and under General Grant. And so there under Grant, we were at Cold Harbor, and we were within, 20 miles of Richmond. Not very far away, maybe only 15 miles of Richmond. And we were getting close, and Grant, they called him the Butcher. I mean, he just threw armies in, threw men in, waves of men in against Bobby Lee there, and lots of men lost their lives. Fight for the Union. Fight to preserve the Union. Fight for freedom. Well, Cold Harbor, Grant had the first wave all lined up. We had three breastworks there and ditches, and they had breastworks on the other side and had their cannons and artillery and grape shot and canister and double canister, and my, it was a fearsome and awesome thing to charge forward right straight into the Confederate lines, and they'd fire their cannons, and all this metal would just come flying out of the muzzles of all those cannons and just rip the whole line of men into shreds. Heads and arms flying through the air. Oh, it was horrible. Well, the second wave lined up, and they sounded the bugle call, and they all went forward and charged and yelled. And as they went forward, all the Confederates together fired their guns and then fired their cannons, and none of the men were able to reach the Confederate works. None of them got across that no man's land. None of them got to the other side, and there we were, lots of us lined up in that third wave, and fortunately it came to pass that I didn't have to go, but the others did. They were all lined up, and they knew what was going to happen. You see, Grant, later on, when he was older, sitting in his wheelchair on his front porch, he wrote that he always regretted sending the third wave in Cold Harbor. First wave accomplished absolutely nothing. Second wave was likewise ripped to shreds. And he ordered a third wave, my buddies, to go in there and just to be cannon fodder. It accomplished absolutely nothing. He wished he'd never sent them in, but the men knew that they were dead men. The men knew that this would be the last day. 7,000 Union troops lost their lives in 25 minutes. 3 waves sent in, accomplished absolutely nothing. The men knew that they would die. One man opened his diary, and at the end there he wrote down, "And on this day I died," and he closed his diary, and soon it was true. Men would take their coats off, and they had a little piece of paper, and they scribbled their name and their hometown. Private Jones, Scottsburg, Indiana. Put it on the back of their coat, pin it to their coat, and then when they sounded the charge, the bugle call, and all, they yelled, they went forward, charge! And they went right into the cannons, and they were blown to bits. And when they fell, body upon body, like the first and second wave, underneath them, maybe 4 men deep, 5 men deep, 6 men, one piled on top of another, arms and legs missing, shot through the eyes, shot through the chest, bodies ripped to shreds. As they lay there face down, on their back was their name and their hometown. And then days later, men and women would come by with ambulances, the carts there, and come by with the stretchers, and they'd pick up the bodies, and they'd see Scottsburg, Indiana, Private Jones. They'd put those bodies on trains, stack them in the railway cars, send them back home to weeping mothers. Mothers who would not even want to look at the body as shredded as it was from the battlefield. But their boy has come home to to be buried in the family cemetery out there at the farm, someplace in Scott County. And today, a government marker, tombstone, resting above his head, if he was returned his head. He died for the Union. But he had one advantage that many people in Scottsburg today don't have. He knew that today was his last day. Generally speaking, we don't know which day will be our last day. If you had only one more day left, would you put off salvation until tomorrow? If you had only one day left, what would you do about your soul? If you had only 24 hours left, would you turn to God and say, I want to be born again. I want God to forgive me because I know it's my last day. You know what your problem is? Do you know why you're not safe? Because you're not like Private Jones. He knew